The market square was loud with voices, but no one saw Arun anymore. He sat beneath the banyan tree, his bowl empty, his clothes torn at the edges. Dust covered his bare feet. Children ran past him, laughing. Women walked by with baskets on their heads, eyes forward, never down. Arun was a shadow. Once, he had a name that people spoke with warmth. Once, he had a small shop where he sold clay pots. But fire took everything. His shop, his wife, his infant son. The villagers said it was bad luck. They stopped greeting him. Slowly, kindness dried up like a well in summer. Now he lived on scraps. A piece of roti here, a banana peel there. The stray dogs knew him better than any man. At night, he sang old songs his mother taught him, songs about rivers and rain and how the world turns in circles. Everything returns, she used to say. What you give, what you lose, what you love, it all comes back. Arun did not believe her anymore. Still, he sang. The songs kept him warm when the nights grew cold. And tonight, the wind was colder than usual. The storm came suddenly, like anger from the sky. Thunder rolled across the hills. Rain poured in thick sheets, turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud. Shopkeepers pulled down their shutters. Mothers called their children inside. Lanterns flickered and died. Arun huddled beneath a torn cloth near the old stone bridge. Water dripped through holes in the fabric, soaking his shirt. He shivered but did not move. Where'd he go? Every door was locked. Every face turned away. Then he heard it, a sound beneath the storm. A groan. Weak. Human. Arun lifted his head, squinting through the rain. At first, he saw nothing. Then lightning flashed, and there, crumpled against the bridge pillar, was a man. His body lay twisted, one arm stretched out as if reaching for help that never came. Arun's heart pounded. He should stay still. Helping strangers brought trouble. But the groan came again, softer now, fading like a candle in wind. His mother's voice whispered in his mind. When you can, you must. Arun stood. His legs trembled as he stepped into the rain, moving toward the dying man. The stranger's clothes were strange. Fine cloth beneath layers of mud and torn edges. His face was pale, lips cracked, eyes half closed. Blood seeped from a wound on his side, mixing with rainwater. Brother, Arun whispered, kneeling beside him. Can you hear me? The man's eyelids fluttered. His breathing was shallow, rattling in his chest like stones in a jar. He tried to speak, but only a wet cough came out. Arun looked around. No one. The village had abandoned the streets. He could leave this man here. No one would blame him. No one would even know. But he could not. With strength he did not know he had, Arun lifted the stranger's arm over his shoulder. The man was heavier than he looked, but Arun dragged him inch by inch through the mud. Rain hammered down. Thunder roared. His feet slipped twice, but he did not let go. His shack was nearby, just 4 wooden posts and a roof of straw. No walls, no door, but it was dry enough. Arun laid the stranger down on his only mat, the one he slept on every night. The man's eyes opened briefly. They were deep, dark, and strangely calm. Then they closed again. Arun's hands shook as he tore a strip from his own shirt to wrap the stranger's wound. The bleeding slowed, but did not stop. The man's breathing grew weaker. Arun knew this look, the look of someone slipping away. He had only one thing left to eat, a small piece of bread a kind woman had given him that morning. It was meant to be his meal for the day, maybe 2 days if he stretched it. Arun broke the bread in half. He soaked one piece in water from his clay pot until it softened, then gently lifted the stranger's head and pressed the wet bread to his lips. Eat, brother. Please. The man's mouth moved. Slowly, weakly he swallowed. Then again, and again. Arun fed him every bit, watching the stranger's chest rise and fall more steadily. When the bread was gone, Arun sat back, his own stomach empty and aching. But something else filled him, a strange, quiet peace. He had nothing left now. No food, no extra clothes, just the rain outside and this dying man inside. Yet for the first time in years, Arun did not feel alone. Morning came slowly, pale light creeping through the cracks in the straw roof. The storm had passed. Birds sang again. The world smelled of wet earth and fresh leaves. Arun woke stiff and cold, curled on the ground beside the mat. He blinked and turned his head. The stranger was awake. The man's eyes were open, no longer clouded with pain. They were clear now, deep and endless like wells. He looked at Arun for a long time without speaking, as if reading something written on his face. Finally, the stranger's lips moved. His voice was soft, hoarse but steady. "You gave me your food." Arun shrugged, embarrassed. "It was only bread. It was everything you had." Arun looked away. A man cannot eat while another dies beside him. The stranger smiled faintly. It was a sad smile, the kind that carried old wounds. He reached out slowly and touched Arun's hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Kindness does not go unseen," the stranger whispered. "What you give in the dark will return in the light." Arun did not understand, but he nodded. The stranger closed his eyes again, not from weakness this time, but from rest. Arun watched him breathe, steady and calm. Something about this man felt different, important, but Arun did not know why. When Arun opened his eyes the next morning, the stranger was gone. The mat was empty. The cloth bandage lay folded neatly on the ground. There was no blood, no trace of the wound. It was as if the man had simply vanished like mist under the sun. Arun sat up quickly, his heart racing. "Brother?" he called out. No answer. Only the distant sound of market vendors setting up their stalls. Then Arun saw it. Something small and round resting where the stranger's head had been. He picked it up carefully. It was a coin, but unlike any he had ever seen. The metal was old, darkened by time, yet it gleamed faintly. Carved on one side was the emblem of a lion with a crown. On the other, strange letters Arun could not read. He turned it over in his palm. His hands trembled. This was no ordinary coin. Every child in the kingdom knew that symbol, the royal seal. Only those of the king's bloodline could carry such a mark. For a commoner to possess, it was forbidden. Dangerous. Arun's mind raced. Who was that man? Why did he leave this? He should throw it away. Bury it. Forget it. But something stopped him. He closed his fist around the coin and whispered, "What have you done to me, stranger?" By midday, the village buzzed with whispers. Someone had seen the stranger leaving Arun's shack before dawn. Someone else swore they saw a royal emblem on the man's torn cloak. Soon, the story twisted and grew. Arun must have robbed him, the blacksmith muttered. He probably found a dying noble and took his belongings, the potter's wife added, clutching her shawl. Even the children, who once ignored him, now pointed and laughed. Thief! Beggar thief! Arun walked to the baker's stall, his stomach hollow with hunger. The baker, a round man with flour on his hands, saw him coming and shook his head. "No bread for you today, Arun." "Please, I have not eaten since." I said no. The baker's voice was cold. "We don't feed thieves here." Arun's throat tightened. He wanted to explain, to show the coin, to tell them he had saved a man, not robbed him. But who would believe him? He was a beggar. Beggars had no voice. He returned to his shack and sat in silence, the coin heavy in his pocket. It felt like both a gift and a curse. He did not know whether to treasure it or fear it. That night, Arun did not sing. 3 days passed. Arun survived on wild berries and water from the well. The villagers avoided him completely now. Even the stray dogs seemed wary. Then, on the 4th morning, the sound of trumpets shattered the quiet. People rushed to the market square. Arun stayed hidden beneath his tree, but curiosity pulled him forward. He moved to the edge of the crowd and froze. Royal guards, 10 of them, sat tall on horses, their armor polished like mirrors. Their red cloaks bore the same lion emblem as the coin in Arun's pocket. At the front, the captain held a scroll sealed with wax. The crowd fell silent. The captain's voice rang out, firm and clear. "By order of His Majesty the King, we seek a man named Arun, who resides in this village." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, searching. Fingers pointed. Arun's legs went weak. His heart hammered in his chest. This was it. They had come for him. They would call him a thief. They would drag him to the gallows. The captain's eyes swept over the crowd and landed on Arun. "You, step forward." Arun could barely breathe. Slowly, shakily, he stepped into the open. Every eye in the village burned into him. The captain dismounted and walked toward Arun, his boots heavy on the dirt. Arun dropped to his knees, trembling. "Please, my lord, I did nothing wrong. I only helped a dying man." "Rise," the captain said, his voice not unkind. Arun looked up, confused. The captain extended a gloved hand. Hesitant, Arun took it and stood. The captain unrolled the scroll and read aloud. "Arun of this village is hereby summoned to the royal palace by direct command of His Majesty. He is to be treated with honor and escorted safely." Silence. Then the crowd erupted. "Honor? Him? The beggar? What madness is this?" Arun's mind spun. Summoned? With honor? It made no sense. The captain gestured to two guards, who brought forward a horse. "You will ride with us." Arun shook his head. I cannot ride. I have never." "You will learn," the captain said simply. He helped Arun onto the saddle. The villagers watched, stunned, as the beggar who had been mocked and starved now sat among the king's men. As they rode out of the village, Arun glanced back one last time. The faces that had turned away now stared in disbelief. But Arun felt no pride, only fear. Deep, cold fear of what awaited him. The journey took 2 days. They crossed forests where trees grew so thick the sunlight barely touched the ground. They forded rivers that sparkled like glass. Arun had never traveled beyond the village. Every sight was new, strange, overwhelming. The guards spoke little, but they treated him well. They shared their food, roasted meat, fresh bread, honey cakes. Arun ate slowly, still not believing this was real. On the second evening, they crested a hill, and Arun gasped. Before him stood the royal palace, vast and gleaming. Its walls were white stone, its towers touched the clouds. Golden gates reflected the setting sun, carved with the lion emblem that haunted his dreams. Nobles in fine silk stood near the gates, chatting and laughing. When they saw the guards approach Arun, their laughter stopped. They stared at his torn clothes, his bare feet, his tangled hair. A woman in a purple gown wrinkled her nose. "Who is that filthy creature?" A man in embroidered robes scoffed. Has the king lost his mind, summoning beggars? Arun felt shame burn his cheeks. He wanted to shrink, to disappear. But the guards did not flinch. The captain rode forward, and the golden gates opened with a low, resonant groan. Inside, everything shone. Arun's world had been dust and hunger. This was a dream made of light. They led Arun through marble halls where his footsteps echoed like thunder. Servants in spotless white moved silently, carrying trays of fruit and pitchers of wine. Tapestries hung on the walls, woven with gold thread, depicting battles and kings of old. Arun felt like a smudge on a perfect painting. Finally, they entered the throne room. It was enormous. Pillars rose like trees, the ceiling painted with stars. At the far end sat a throne carved from dark wood and inlaid with silver. But the throne was empty. Whispers filled the hall. Courtiers stood in clusters, their faces tight with worry. "The king has not risen in days," one said. "They say he is dying," another murmured. "And the prince still missing. What will become of us?" Arun's stomach twisted. The king was dying? Then why summon him? What could a beggar do for a dying king? The captain stepped forward and bowed to a tall man in dark robes, the royal chamberlain. The chamberlain's eyes swept over Arun with thinly veiled disgust. "This is the man." "Yes, my lord." Chamberlain sighed. "Follow me." They walked down a narrow corridor lit by flickering torches. The air grew colder. Arun's heart pounded harder with every step. Somewhere ahead, a door waited, and behind it, the truth. The chamberlain stopped before a heavy wooden door. He knocked twice, then pushed it open. Inside was a room dimmed by curtains. The smell of herbs and sickness hung in the air. Physicians in long robes knelt beside a bed draped in gold cloth. On the bed lay a man, pale and still. Arun's breath caught. It was him, the stranger, the dying man he had saved. But now Arun understood. This was no stranger. This was the king. The physicians glanced up as Arun entered, their faces blank with exhaustion. One of them whispered, He has been calling for someone. A name we did not know. The Chamberlain gestured to Arun. Step closer. Arun's legs felt like stone. Slowly, he approached the bed. The king's face was gaunt, his breathing shallow. But his eyes, those deep, calm eyes, flickered open. Recognition flashed in them. The king's lips trembled. A tear slid down his cheek. You, he whispered, his voice cracked and broken. You carried me when I was nothing. You fed me when I was dying. You gave me your only bread. Arun's throat closed. He could not speak. The king reached out a frail hand. Arun took it, and the king's grip, though weak, was full of warmth. Now, the king whispered, you shall see what true justice means. The king's physician helped him sit up slightly, propping pillows behind him. Though weak, the king's voice carried a strange strength, as if his will alone held him to life. Summon the court, he commanded. The chamberlain hesitated. Your Majesty, you must rest. Now, within minutes, the throne room filled. Nobles, ministers, and guards crowded in, their faces a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Arun stood beside the king's bed, feeling 100 eyes on him, judging, questioning. The king lifted his hand, and silence fell like a curtain. I was lost, the king began, his voice trembling but clear. Betrayed by men I trusted. Poisoned. Left to die on a roadside far from here. I wore no crown, carried no seal. I was nothing but a dying man in the rain. The crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. This man, the king gestured to Arun, did not know who I was. He saw only a stranger in pain. He gave me his last food. He carried me to shelter. He asked for nothing in return. Murmurs spread. Some faces softened. Others remained cold, suspicious. From this day, the king declared, Arun is a guest of honor in this palace. Let no man speak ill of him. Let no door be closed to him. The nobles bowed, but their eyes betrayed reluctance. Arun felt it, a wall of resentment rising around him. The king's decree spread through the palace like wildfire. Servants whispered in corners. Nobles gathered in private chambers, their voices low and sharp. Arun was given a room, small but clean, with a bed softer than anything he had ever touched. He sat on the edge of it, overwhelmed. This morning he had been a beggar. Tonight, he was a guest of the king. But he did not feel safe. A servant brought him food, roasted lamb, rice with saffron, fruits he could not name. Arun ate slowly, still expecting someone to burst in and call it all a mistake. That night, he could not sleep. He stood by the window, looking out at the palace gardens lit by lanterns. Everything was beautiful. Everything was strange. Meanwhile, in a shadowed chamber across the palace, a man named Lord Senath paced like a caged animal. He was the king's chief advisor, a man who had tasted power and craved more. A beggar, Senath hissed to his companion. The king elevates a filthy beggar while I, who have served him for 20 years, am ignored. His companion, a wiry man with cold eyes, nodded. The people will not accept it, my lord. Use that. Senath's lips curled into a thin smile. Yes, let us show them what this hero truly is. The trap was already forming in his mind. Days passed. The king's health improved slowly, but he remained bedridden. Arun spent his time walking the palace gardens, still uncertain of his place. Some servants smiled at him. Others looked away. One afternoon, as Arun sat beneath a tree, a voice called out, You there, beggar. Arun turned. Lord Senath stood before him, dressed in fine robes, his expression sharp as a blade. My lord, Arun said, bowing his head. Senath circled him slowly, like a hawk eyeing prey. Tell me, how does it feel to go from rags to riches in a single night? I am only here because the king is kind. Kind? Senath smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Or perhaps foolish. Do you know what the court whispers? They say you are a fraud, that you staged the rescue, that you planted yourself on that road, knowing the king would pass. Arun's heart clenched. That is not true. Truth does not matter, Senath said coldly. Only what people believe. Before Arun could respond, Senath turned and walked away, his robes trailing behind him like a shadow. That night, Arun felt the first real tremor of danger. Senath was powerful. and power, Arun had learned, did not like to be questioned. He clutched the coin the stranger, the king, had left him. It was still in his pocket, warm against his skin. A reminder of why he was here. A reminder of the truth. 2 days later, the palace was in uproar. Guards stormed into Arun's room at dawn. He woke to rough hands dragging him from bed. What is happening? You are under arrest, the lead guard said coldly. For what? They did not answer. They hauled him through the corridors as servants and nobles stopped to watch. Whispers followed him like smoke. In the throne room, Lord Senath stood with a smug expression. Beside him were 2 men Arun had never seen, merchants by the look of their clothes. Senath addressed the gathered court. These men have come forward with a grave accusation. They claim that this beggar, Arun, stole from the royal stables 3 nights ago. Jewels meant for the queen's tribute. Gasps filled the room. Arun's mind reeled. I have never been to the stables. I do not even know where they are. Senath smiled. Guards, search his quarters. They returned minutes later, carrying a velvet pouch. The guard opened it, and out spilled rubies and emeralds, glittering like stolen stars. Arun's mouth fell open. Those are not mine. I have never seen them before. But no one was listening. The crowd's faces hardened. Even those who had smiled at him now looked away. Thief, someone muttered. Fraud, another said. Arun's world crumbled. He had been set up, and there was no one to defend him. They dragged Arun through the palace gates, past the same nobles who had once bowed. Now they sneered and spat. Children threw stones. Women cursed his name. He was paraded through the city streets, wrists bound, head bowed. The crowd grew louder, angrier. Some called for his execution, others for the gallows. Arun felt his soul breaking. He had done nothing wrong. He had saved a dying man. And now, for kindness, he was being destroyed. They brought him to the palace dungeon, a dark, cold place beneath the earth. The guard shoved him into a cell and slammed the iron door shut. The sound echoed like a final judgment. Arun collapsed on the stone floor. His body shook. Tears came, hot and bitter. Why? He whispered into the darkness. Why does kindness only bring suffering? No answer came. Only the drip of water somewhere in the shadows. Hours passed, or maybe days. He could not tell. The darkness swallowed time. But then, faintly, Arun heard footsteps. Someone was coming. He lifted his head. A figure appeared beyond the bars, holding a lantern. The light hurt his eyes. Arun, a voice said softly. It was the king's chamberlain. His face was grave. The king does not know you are here. Lord Senath has kept it from him. But the king is growing weaker. If he dies before the truth is revealed, you will die too. Arun's throat tightened. Then I am already dead. The chamberlain shook his head. Not yet. Have faith. He turned and left, the light fading with him. Arun was alone again. But this time, something stirred in his chest. A small, stubborn flame. That night, Arun did not sleep. He sat in the corner of the cell, knees pulled to his chest, and prayed. He prayed not for freedom, but for the truth to be seen. He prayed for the king's health. He prayed that his act of kindness, however twisted by lies, would not die in vain. The stone walls seemed to listen. The torches on the wall flickered, their flames stretching higher, brighter. Arun felt something shift in the air, a presence, gentle and vast. Everything returns, his mother's voice echoed in his mind. What you give, what you lose, what you love, it all comes back. He closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his face, but they were no longer bitter. There was something else. Acceptance. Surrender. Hope. Above ground, the palace was restless. Servants spoke in hushed tones. The king had worsened. Physicians ran through the halls. Lord Senath paced his chambers, waiting. If the king died tonight, Senath would take control. The beggar would be forgotten, executed quietly. The throne would shift. Power would be his. Everything was falling into place. But that night, the sky opened. Thunder cracked like the voice of heaven. Lightning split the darkness. Rain poured so thick it felt like the world was weeping. And in his sickbed, the king opened his eyes. The storm raged through the night. Wind howled through the palace towers. Lightning struck so close that windows rattled. Servants hid in their quarters, whispering that the gods were angry. In his chamber, the king lay drenched in sweat, his body burning with fever. Physicians hovered uselessly, wringing their hands. His breathing was shallow, his eyes closed. Then suddenly his body went rigid. His eyes flew open, but they saw nothing of the room. He was somewhere else. In his mind, he stood on a muddy road beneath a storm. Rain poured down. His body was weak, dying, and above him, a face appeared, kind, worn, gentle. A man in rags who knelt beside him and said, "I will not leave you." The vision shifted. He saw himself lying on a thin mat in a beggar's shack. The same man tore bread in half and pressed it to his lips, whispering, "Eat, brother, please." The king's heart clenched. He saw the man's face again, Arun, the beggar who had saved him, the man who had given everything. And now, in the vision, he saw Arun in chains, locked in darkness alone. Forgotten. The king gasped, his body jerking upright. The physicians rushed forward. "Your Majesty, where is Arun?" the king demanded, his voice hoarse but powerful. The room fell silent. "Where is he?" the king roared. "Bring him to me now." The chamberlain rushed into the dungeon, keys jangling in his hands. He flung open Arun's cell door. "Come, the king calls for you." Arun stumbled to his feet, weak from hunger and cold. They pulled him up the stone stairs, through the palace corridors. Nobles stepped aside, their faces pale with confusion. The throne room doors burst open. The king sat upright on his bed, propped by pillows, his eyes blazing with fury and clarity. "Bring Lord Senath," the king commanded. Moments later, Senath was dragged in, his smug expression faltering. The king's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You accused this man of theft. You planted evidence. You turned my court against him." Senath's face went white. "Your Majesty, I only sought to protect." Silence. The king's hand trembled as he pointed at Senath. "I dreamed the truth. The gods showed me your treachery. You wanted me dead. You wanted the throne. And when this beggar reminded the people that kindness still exists, you feared it. Because kindness is the one thing you can never fake." Senath dropped to his knees. "Mercy, your Majesty. Please." "You showed no mercy to him," the king said coldly. "Why should I show it to you?" The guards seized Senath. He screamed and begged, but no one moved to help him. He was dragged away, his cries echoing through the halls. The king turned to Arun. His face softened. "Forgive me. I should have protected you." Arun shook his head, tears streaming. "You owe me nothing, your Majesty." The next morning, the entire kingdom gathered in the palace courtyard. Word had spread, justice would be delivered. Lord Senath stood in chains before the crowd, his fine robes replaced with rough cloth. His head was bowed, his arrogance shattered. The king, though still weak, stood on the balcony above. His voice rang out, strong and clear. "This man plotted to steal the throne. He poisoned me, left me to die, and when a poor beggar saved my life, he tried to destroy him with lies." The crowd roared in anger. Some threw stones. Guards raised their shields to protect Senath. The king raised his hand in silence. "I could have him executed, but I will not. Instead, I sentenced him to a different fate." The crowd leaned in. "Lord Senath will be stripped of his title, his land, his wealth. He will live among the poorest, work with his hands, and learn what it means to be powerless. Perhaps, in time, he will understand what kindness truly costs." Some of the crowd cheered. Others muttered that it was too merciful. But the king's decision was final. Senath was led away, no longer a lord, but a laborer. His fate was his own doing. Arun watched from the shadows, neither proud nor vengeful. He felt only a quiet sadness. Power had blinded Senath, and now, stripped bare, perhaps he would finally see. That evening, the king summoned Arun to his private chambers. The storm had passed. The sky was clear, painted with stars. The king sat by the window, looking stronger now, though still pale. He gestured for Arun to sit beside him. "I owe you my life," the king said softly. "Name your reward. Gold? Land? A title? Whatever you wish, it is yours." Arun was quiet for a long time. He thought of the village, the empty bowl, the cold nights. He thought of the bread he had given, the stranger he had saved. Finally he spoke. "Your Majesty, I do not want gold. I do not want land." The king frowned, confused. "Then what do you want?" Arun looked out at the stars. "I want a small house, a place where no one goes hungry, where travelers can rest, where the forgotten are remembered." The king's eyes filled with tears. "You are a rare man, Arun, rarer than any jewel. I'm only a beggar who chose to see a man instead of a stranger." The king nodded slowly. "Then you shall have your house, and more. You will oversee the kingdom's shelters. You will ensure that no one, no matter how poor, is ever turned away." Arun bowed his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty." The king smiled. "No, thank you." A month later, the palace courtyard was transformed. Tables stretched end to end, covered with food, roasted meats, rice, fruits, sweets. Lanterns hung from every tree. Musicians played soft, joyful songs. It was the Feast of Gratitude, held in Arun's honor. Nobles and commoners sat side by side, an unheard of sight. Children ran through the gardens, laughing. The same children who had once mocked Arun now brought him flowers, their faces bright with admiration. Arun sat beside the king, still wearing simple clothes, still humble. He watched the crowd with quiet wonder. The king stood and raised his cup. The crowd fell silent. "A year ago, I was betrayed and left to die. I had everything, power, wealth, a crown. But at that moment, I had nothing. I was a dying man in the rain." He turned to Arun. "This man gave me bread when he had none. He carried me when he could barely walk. He asked for nothing. And in doing so, he reminded me what a king should be." The crowd erupted in applause. Arun's face flushed. He was not used to this. The king continued, "Let this feast remind us all, true wealth is not in gold. It is in the hands that lift others, in the hearts that give without counting the cost." He raised his cup higher. "To Arun, to kindness, to the invisible made visible." "To Arun," the crowd shouted. And the beggar who had once been forgotten now stood at the center of a kingdom's gratitude. Years passed. The kingdom changed. Under the king's rule, shelters were built in every town. Food was given freely to those in need. The forgotten were remembered. And at the heart of it all was Arun. He oversaw the shelters with gentle care. He walked among the poor, sat with the sick, listened to the broken. He never forgot where he came from. He never stopped seeing people the way he had seen the dying stranger on that stormy night, as human, as worthy, as sacred. The king grew old, but his strength returned. He ruled with wisdom and compassion, always crediting Arun for reminding him of what mattered. One evening, the two men sat together in the palace gardens, watching the sunset. "Do you ever regret it?" the king asked. "Saving me that night? Look at the trouble it brought you." Arun smiled. "Trouble only came because the truth mattered. I would do it again." The king nodded. "I believe you would." They sat in comfortable silence, two men from different worlds, bound by a single act of kindness. Far away, in Arun's old village, travelers told the story. They spoke of the beggar who saved the king. They said his name with reverence now. And when the wind blew through the old stone bridge, it carried a whisper: kindness does not go unseen. Time moves forward as it always does. The king eventually passed, old and content, his kingdom strong. Arun, too, grew old, his beard silver, his hands worn. But the story did not fade. It was told in every corner of the land. Mothers told it to their children at bedtime. Teachers spoke of it in schools. It became more than a story. It became a truth, woven into the kingdom's soul. On his final day, Arun sat beneath the same banyan tree where he had once begged for scraps. But now, children gathered around him, not to mock but to listen. "Tell us the story, grandfather," a little girl asked. "Tell us about the storm." Arun smiled, his eyes distant with memory. "It was the coldest night I had ever known. I had nothing, no food, no hope. But I heard a man dying, and I could not walk away." "Why?" a boy asked. "You could have let someone else help." Arun's voice grew soft. "Because, my child, we are all dying in some way. Some from hunger, some from loneliness, some from being forgotten. When you see someone falling, You do not ask if they deserve your hand. You simply reach out. The children were quiet, absorbing his words like rain on dry earth. That night, Arun closed his eyes for the last time. He did not die in pain or fear. He died peacefully, his heart full, knowing he had lived a life that mattered. And in the years that followed, whenever someone showed kindness to a stranger, people would say, "That is the way of Arun." His name became a blessing, a prayer, a reminder. The coin he kept all those years was placed in the Royal Museum, behind glass, with words inscribed below, "The Beggar's Coin." A reminder that kindness given in obscurity becomes the crown of destiny. And so the circle closed. What he had given returned. What he had lost was found. What he had loved lived on. For kindness, once planted, never truly dies. It grows in hearts, spreads through stories, and echoes across generations. And on quiet nights, when the wind blows through the old stone bridge, travelers still hear it. A whisper that sounds like a song, like a promise, like truth. Kindness does not go unseen. Moral of the story. Kindness given in obscurity becomes the crown of destiny. True wealth lies not in gold, but in compassion that outlives us. Please like, share with your loved ones, and subscribe to support us.